Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn on Transit-Oriented Development, or TOD for short. I'm Grace Gallucci, Chief Executive Officer of the Northeast Ohio Area-Wide Coordinating Agency, or NOACA for short. I'm pleased to be able to offer this series of discussions on topics of interest to planners and engineers. For this year's series, we're focusing on issues related to our long-range plan, eNEO 2050, an equitable future for Northeast Ohio. This framework will set the agenda for all forms of transportation in the region, including automobile, transit, bicycle, walking, and we'll be looking at not only roadways and bridges, but we're also talking about the physical aspects or the physical assets of the transit system. This plan will also examine the region's land use patterns, environmental concerns, and income disadvantaged and sensitive areas with the goal of identifying better policy for housing and economic development within the region. Really, we're trying to ensure that this plan is a long-range transportation plan that is embedded within a comprehensive plan that addresses those areas of land use, economic development, housing, health impacts, and overall environment. So at this point, I will turn the program over to your host for today, Gail Godick. Gail?
Oh, thank you, Grace. And I echo Grace in thanking everyone for joining us today for the Lunch and Learn on Transit-Oriented Development. TOD is an exciting trend in creating vibrant, livable, and sustainable communities and neighborhoods. And we are delighted to be able to present this topic thanks to our guest speakers, Maribeth Feke and Ken Sislak. Maribeth is the Director of Planning for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority. She oversees long and short-range capital project planning, rapid transit and transit center planning, transit-oriented development, public art, environmental planning, and property management. Maribeth has been instrumental in creating strategic alliances and partnerships within the RTA service area. Existing projects include the completion of an RTA strategic plan through 2030, a TOD plan for West 25th Street, and new mobility transportation projects. Maribeth holds an MBA from Case Western Reserve University and a BA from Cleveland State University. She is active in several local development corporations, including serving as the chair of the Historic Warehouse District Board of Trustees. She's also a trustee of the West Creek Conservancy and a director of Northeast Ohio Advancing Women in Transportation Symposium, or WTS. She is also an active member of the local chapter of the American Planning Association as an AICP. She serves on several NOACA governmental bodies, including the Transit Council and the Transportation and Air Quality subcommittees. Ken Sislak is a vice president with the consulting firm AECOM. He is a transport economist with more than 45 years of public transportation management and consulting experience. He is the former assistant general manager of Garfield Heights Coach Line and the former director of rail transportation for the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, where he was responsible for managing rail transit services and purchasing the current rail car fleet. So Ken has been involved in many studies in Cleveland, including the Berea IX Center Red Line Extension Study, Euclid Corridor Healthline Project, Red Line Healthline Extension Study, Thrive 105 Corridor BRT Study, and the NOACA Transit-Oriented Development Scorecard and Pilot Project Study. Ken is currently a senior advisor to the NOACA Regional Strategic Transit Plan Project. He has a BA in economics from John Carroll University and an MBA in finance from Case Western Reserve University. Ken served in the U.S. Army as an infantry officer and was decorated for valor and meritorious achievement while serving in Vietnam. So Ken, we thank you for your service there. I want to welcome Maribeth and Ken. And before we hand it over to them to do the presentation, I want to mention that we sent them the questions, so they put them all in the PowerPoint, and they were addressing it that way, so we don't have to, stop and come back to me to ask a question. And if any of you listening have questions for them, please type them in the Zoom chat box, and then we will, at the end of the when they're at the end of the presentation, if we have more time for questions, we will address your questions there. So please type them in the chat box. And so I'm going to turn it over to Ken and Maribeth. And Maribeth and Ken, take it away.
Thanks, Gail. If you can advance the slide, you can see the series of questions that Maribeth and I are going to try to address during our presentation. We're going to try to make this conversational, so it's not a bunch of just two talking heads talking at you. So if we advance the slide, the first question is, what is transit-oriented development? Gail, move the slide, please. So what do we mean by TOD? And we saw, there are 4 foundational principles, and it really is development around transit. So the T in TOD is transit. And so what we need transit is to be good frequent service, and development that surrounds that transit needs to be compact and walkable compared to its surroundings. That requires great public realm, good sidewalks, plazas, bike paths, and a human scale street grid that buildings work at ground level. A very rich mix and a diverse mix of land uses and housing. And really, it can't be TOD if you have lots of parking. So what we're trying to do is take a fresh approach to parking, less of it. A lot less parking, and shared wherever possible, sensitively located and designed and integrated into the program and project. Next slide, please.
So this is where I fit in. It's a lot of it is about land use and about people. So the TOD, and I want to thank Stantec for the use of these slides, is density, diversity, and design. You can go to the next slide. By density, we need population density, employment density, people density. We need people. We need, if we get for transit a 1% mode split, which means 1% of the people on a use have used transit, then the higher the density, the more people, the more stuff, the higher our ridership. So that's a lot about why we need density around transit. You can go to the next slide. Diversity. Diversity talks about type of activities as well as people. So building topologies, how much, where the front is, the retail, the housing, the employment, all of that really affects the number of people that take transit, as well as the equity and diversity of the types of people. Different mixes of income, different mixes of all sorts of people that live on transit. We are a utility, we transport all people. So diversity and equity are very important to our system. And finally, the next slide, design. Design means a lot. How we welcome transit, the street waiting environment, very important to people getting off the bus. Remember, first, last mile, people are on transit are pedestrians first. So how they get to and from that vehicle is very important, and how they get to their final destination. What that looks like, safety, green, where it is all very important to the transit rider. And I think we go to the next slide and Ken will pick up, since he's the consultant internationally known.
Thanks, Maribeth. It's really about integrating the transit stations into the urban development. And I think if you look at the picture in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, I think you can see where the transit stations are. It happens to be where all the big buildings are congregated. That's Toronto, and that's the Yonge Street subway line. If you look below it, that is a station in Oakland on the BART system, and you can see how the development is totally integrated with that station, so that the pedestrian realm that connects the station to its adjacent buildings works really well. If you move to the left, you'll see Miami, where they were constructing new buildings adjacent to the Miami-Dade Metro line. And following that to the left, and last but not least, is Vancouver, British Columbia, that I think is the most transit-oriented city in North America. The metro line runs right through the building, as you can see in that picture. Next slide, please. But Cleveland has a TOD heritage itself. Shaker Square and the old Shaker Rapid, or the blue and green lines as we know them today, was the first planned shopping center around transit. In fact, the entire city of Shaker Heights is designed around the Shaker Rapid, the blue and green lines. All the streets on Van Aken happen to lead to a station so that the street grid is cut in a way so that the trains are only crossing streets every half a mile. A lot of thought went into it. And of course, Tower City, the original Terminal Tower complex was also a TOD complex. That was the hub of all the public transit services in Cleveland. It still is. And it was once a bustling train station. Next slide, please.
Ken, could you have found an older picture of Shaker Square? Are you going to, I see the 70s fashion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm an old guy, and that's my era. Next slide. And of course, what we all know with the Euclid Corridor Healthline project, it started as a bus improvement project that really generated a lot of investment and interest. And you can see from the Plain Dealers article, we crossed out the old article, added $6 billion because the amount of development that has occurred along Euclid Avenue that's oriented toward the transit system. And these are street frontages. They're aimed at and adjacent to stations is just remarkable. It's become a rallying point for anybody in the country that wants to come see what a real BRT system looks like and how a BRT system itself can generate the kind of transit-oriented development we see along rail lines that you saw in the picture in Toronto. Next
It's
slide.
actually 9.5 billion now.
Oh, wow.
Worldwide, we're a silver. Worldwide, we're known silver. There was a planning magazine. APA has a planning magazine, and we were featured there. And the people in that paper were actually from South America, so it's worldwide. And I think, you know, there's a lot of discussion about the Euclid Corridor or Healthline, whether those, because the institutions are so large, whether that development would have happened with or without the Healthline. And I think the answer is some would, but it wouldn't be. If you look at the transformation of Cleveland State, as well as Midtown, you see a link 59 there. Midtown is booming right now, and it's a lot. If you ask Jeff Epstein, it's all because of the interest in the development of the Healthline.
I absolutely agree. Maribeth, so what do you think is driving the trend toward TOD?
Well, these things are, right? Certainly not the pandemic. We won't talk about that.
No, that's...
But I think that people want, we hear about the millennials who want to work and live and not have cars because their phones are more expensive than most people's cars. I'm sorry. But I think that's part of it. And I think people are moving back to cities, and I think that trend will start again after the pandemic goes away. But people want a lifestyle that's 24-hour, and you can use that on transit. They don't want to have to park your car and go move and get to a parking meter. That's part of it. And it's, there's a whole lot of sustainability where people want to be green and live green, and not having a car contributes to that. As well as we've got a wealth of information from developers who now can figure out how to make money on transit. And that is a key success. So the market demand, supply, you're an economist, Ken, that really builds a lot of it.
Yep, I agree. Next slide, please. So why is TOD important? Well, we've heard that it helps create sustainable, thriving communities, and you saw pictures of how that occurs. It stimulates productivity and reinvestment. How does it do that? Well, when you aggregate people together, it increases productivity because, you know, we're gregarious. Set the pandemic aside for a while. Why are we still meeting? Although it's virtually, we're still meeting. We need, helps us to be productive, and a transit-oriented environment helps that. Maribeth also said that it increases ridership and obviously revenue. But for me, from the economist standpoint, it enhances value capture opportunities to actually fund the project so that you can build more stuff Next slide, please. Our friends at HNTB had sent out a survey to the industry a while back and wanted to know what they thought was the benefits of a transit-oriented development. And you see the #1 answer is reduce dependency on driving. It's the walkability. It's the ability to move about and have mobility and access to a system that does not require a car that really makes TOD work for everybody and allows everybody to live, work, and play in the same area and provides that kind of thriving vibrancy that Maribeth was talking about that people are seeking today. It also provides access to better life services. You can get to hospitals and other fitness centers and educational activities, all kinds of activities. So the last thing that it does is it revitalizes urban areas. But the first and most important thing for TOD is that it really reduces our dependence on driving and really stimulates a vibrant, thriving local economy. Next slide, please. So the question for us too is, how does TOD improve equity? And you have to define equity in various ways. For us, it's building mobility and balancing mobility and development. Mobility is the ability to achieve what you want to in life through gaining access to education, gaining access to a job, gaining access to healthcare activities, or just having access to your family, be able to travel around. It improves neighborhoods and communities, and we know that TOD needs to respect the human scale and create a quality pedestrian realm. It also raises property values, and this is where we have to sometimes we get concerned about what people call gentrification. You know, when you make an investment in transit and suddenly the value of that land goes up and people become excited and they start developing it, you may find that some of the poorer people get pushed out or no longer can afford the rents. But, you know, a study that was done by the Federal Reserve Bank here in Cleveland said, you know, gentrification does have its positive side effects. For example, if the houses were purchased by people as affordable housing and they are the owner-occupiers of the land and transit-oriented development is taking place adjacent to their properties and their property values increase, the equity in that value, their house goes up. So it depends on how you define equity. Equity can mean access to jobs, access to educational opportunities, but it also actually means equity in financial terms. So
And if you look at those developments spurring other developments, you can create needed social services around transit, which helps people without cars, because 56% of RTA's ridership do not own cars. So getting them to services, to jobs, and to appointments is very important.
Yeah, and especially if you can cluster healthcare facilities and other activities like we're doing in Midtown and at Windermere, is a real benefit to the people that.
And on 25th Street.
Yeah, exactly. Next slide, please. So how do TOD projects get selected? I was fortunate to have been working on the project for NOACA, as Gail mentioned in her opening remarks, on the TOD pilot project and readiness program for the NOACA region, Greater Cleveland. And we developed a readiness framework. It's a framework that we've developed and implemented around the country. And we look at things of various types. We look at the place typology and the characteristics, and we decide based on market analysis and other factors whether or not this is a long-term or emerging ready or an arrived land area, if you will, development area. So this is a framework that we've developed, and we score it. Next slide, please. And we have a readiness score chart that we look at connectivity, how well the station is connected to the surroundings and other parts of the transportation network. And it's really important that, you got to have frequency on the transit line because it's the T in the TOD. So connectivity to transit good frequent service on the transit lines that serve that area, the general market strength. How is the real estate market performing in that station area? You know, there is some areas in the city that have not done as well as other parts of the city. You know, Gordon Square has done really, really well. Buckeye Woodhill over the last 50 years has not done well, but that's changing because the cities are making investments in infrastructure. Land availability, the extent to which the station has land adjacent to it that's underutilized or could be used for higher and better uses is important. And I think Maribeth will be talking about that in some of her projects as examples later. And more importantly is institutional support, the degree to which jurisdictions and non-governmental agencies such as our community development corporations provide planning, regulatory, infrastructure support that really helps that TOD get started, gets financed, and gets moved along, because there's a multiple avenues of approach on how to finance these things. Next slide.
And I guess the other things that we should talk about there is financing and leveraging that financing. If you talk about institutional support, you also mean that on the banking community. They are going to lend money on that. And that's all about the readiness and the marketability of projects around our stations.
That's why it's important to do a real good, thorough market analysis of those areas to make sure that these projects, if you have a dream, they can actually pencil out. Maribeth, you've had lots of really recent good success. Why don't you talk about some of your
I'll
cool
talk
projects?
about it. I want to talk a little bit about the topology because that was really unique. That and it's unknown across the country. MPOs normally don't do TOD plans. So the fact that NOACA a few years ago did this is really groundbreaking and innovative. And you should go to the website and look at this piece of work because it's really, really well done. And it's not just Cuyahoga County, it's the entire region putting areas into typologies of what can emerge and what type of areas. Are they a small station? Are they an urban hyperlink like University Circle is to RTA or downtown? So I want to talk a little bit about some projects that we've done recently. Aspen Place, it won an award at the 2040 awards last year because it's such a unique project. If you go forward, Aspen Place is on our 60. If you go forward to the next slide, it's close. It's right adjacent to the RTA West 65th Street station, which is our first green infrastructure station. It's $10 million on a very small, like acre and a half of land, triangle shape that dip down into the slope. 40 affordable housing units, financed with the whole layers of financing, but LIHTC or low income housing. And it's located at the corner of 61st and Lorraine, right by the station. We had to lease them parking spaces for them to use. Go forward. And we bought it because when we built that station, we needed access to it for construction staging, and we wanted to preserve the corner so you could see the station. So whatever development we did, you had to be able to see the station, and you can. And I said it was 1.4, but it's actually less than an acre. That you can see it was a triangle, and that brush is going down to our tracks. And we executed 2 options. It took 6 years to build this. We did have an option with the Detroit Shoreway organization, who finally sold it to the developer, and it opened last year. Go on. It's got a waiting list. You can see how attractive it is. Modern, and you can still see the station, and they blend together. Done it 2 different times, but with good planning with our partners at Detroit Shoreway. Go ahead. Mayfield, this is one of my favorite stations. Go forward. Mayfield Station, we actually, through a series of TLCI grants, we moved the station 1,200 feet up from where it was at 120th Street. Really great for people who were in the cemetery there, but not for the people in Little Italy where the density was. So we moved it, we built new stations with the help of NOACA and also ODOT and FTA. We put it under bridges, we took down a bridge, and you can see since it's been built, all of the condos that have happened, they were vacant lots when we built the station. Mayfield Loft, you'll see pictures, the Quadro condos, centric, really transforming this area. Go ahead. And that wouldn't have be done without our station. You can see center, it used to be a parking lot. You can see how great our station looks. It's open air, you walk up to the station. We don't have any heating costs, and we also, with the help of NOACA and also ODOT, we're able to make those bridges better so you could walk under it. Those of you who have done it, remember it was more like a cave where you saw stalactites hanging from it. It was rather dingy. It's not so anymore. Van Aken, very exciting. This is a light rail, so we'll continue east, but now we're not on heavy rail on the red line. This is Van Aken district at the end of the blue line. You can see what they've built around it. You can see that we are in the middle of it and have really created challenges for developing street frontage as well as development parcels around us, because we have a train. We also have a very active bus hub. This is a hub for our east side where we have the 41, which is one of our highest routes, and a lot of transfers between. So we've worked with the City of Shaker Heights again through several TLCI grants and planning and development with RMS, the City of Shaker Heights. Go forward. And you can see what it looks like now. You see the train in the foreground, right next to development. Some of the highest rental units in the county are right there by the train. People from Europe come here because it's a place where they feel comfortable, where they can shop, where they can have a bite to eat and sit and watch the trains, the buses, and get there quickly. Go on. Other projects. We are not done with TOD. We are continuing, and let's talk about those. 25th Street connects, one of our best, Ohio City. This was built in 1993, thanks to Bill Gould, who is now deceased. But go forward. We also did a station area plan that showed how we could use the station, which is sort of off to the center, to modify and really create a connection to Ohio City. Okay, go to the next. This is what the area looks like. And you can see that we have the station area between 25th Street and how it's been growing. Go on. We also have a site that we own that is on Columbus Road that we have a developer interested in. He's creating a performa and working towards creating a mixed-use site right here. On Duck Island, there is development going on. Westside Market, we've also got Harbor Bay that's redoing the retail district to orient to the 25th Street station. That's undergoing design right now. We hope to have an agreement in place with the developer, hopefully by the end of the year. Go on. And you can see the red line, how it connects to all of our bus routes and how important it is to our bus line and to 25th Street, which has our Metro Healthline on the 25th Street Connects project. Go on. And this is what a picture of what a TOD that incorporated all of that could look like. Go on. And this is another concept from the plan. And soon we'll have renderings of what our 25th Street project will look like, as well as connecting to the Harbor Bay project that's under construction right now. Go on. And this is what it could look like, all the density. And you think, oh my God, that couldn't happen. Look on Detroit. We've got all those new projects. Or look at University Circle, where one center right there on Euclid and MLK shows. It really can't happen in art, and we can afford that density and populate it. So right now we have the Line Greenway that's under construction, a bikeway, and it's very unique that we're going to have a red line, so you're going to have a train, you're going to have significant bus service on the Metro Healthline and all the connections. You're going to have a bikeway that can get you there. You're going to have new TOD as well as the other development around there. So this is really looking forward. We're also in the midst of a 25 Connects project, which is looking at a BRT corridor like the Metro Healthline, making it a FTA certified BRT where we have enhanced stations, we have enhanced development. We're even going a step further and looking at the land use, working very closely with the city and developers, how we can create TOD practical projects along the entire corridor, all the way up to where the second Metro Health section is, which is State and Broadview, where that ends. And the other, so that's what the whole, it's 2.7 miles of a corridor,
Yes.
but we're really doing holistic planning on that and fundraising.
Gail,
Go on.
next slide. There you go.
And that's what it looks like, the whole corridor. Next slide, the project. Look at 25connects.com for the website. And now I'll hand it over to you to a more emerging, but one that my real estate manager just came to me and said, I think I've got a developer interested in this land. And the first day, I've been with RTA for like 26 years. And on day one, my boss sent me out to West Boulevard to look at that vacant lot there. And 26 years later, developing it. Go on.
It takes time. Good things happen. Well, this is the existing station and area around the West Park Station. West Park. This is the West Boulevard Station at Berea Road, and this is where you get on the train. It was designed to be a park and ride lot back in the 50s, and it still is a park and ride lot. But you can see RTA owns a lot of parking lot, and they also own the land adjacent on the other side of the railroad tracks to the west. We're looking south in this picture, so the west is to your right. So the right of the railroad tracks.
And that's
RTA
the Chickle building with apartments right across from it. That's where we're talking about. We own that.
Yes.
It was used in the 50s.
Next slide, please. So what we did is part of the NOACA TOD study. We looked at this thing, looked at the surrounding area of West Boulevard and the Cadell area, and looked at the various land uses and did a market analysis. Next slide, please. And we found that, you know, West Boulevard they have a lot of population, a lot of employment. There's demand for more housing there. There's capture value potential. And we believe that this can be a real catalyst project for this neighborhood. So the market analysis sort of supports what Maribeth has been trying to market for 26 years. Next slide, please. So we looked at the parcels. Those are the parcels A and B, as we showed you in the other picture. Next slide. And we decided, you know, if we have good demand for commercial, we have demand for apartments and residential, what kind of concepts can we come up with to utilize all these various pieces of land that are available and vacant and ripe for redevelopment? Next slide, please. So we looked at cross sections. You know, we want to replace parking. It is a park and ride lot. A lot of people park there, especially on Brown Sundays in particular. So we need to replace parking, and we got to have some parking for the commercial and residential elements of any development. So we're looking on how we stack all that stuff. Next slide, please. So this is, you know, this is what we have today. And if we go to the next slide, this is a concept that our architects at AECOM came up with that is based on the market analysis that was done. You know, so this building, if some developer wanted to build something along these lines, it would be supported. There would be demand for it, and they would get the financing to pay for it. Next slide, please. But it really requires, you know, a public-private partnership. So this is where NOACA comes in with TLCI projects and working with the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County. Because we need to really, you know, create a transit plaza, get rid of it's a very confusing intersection, and because of the sight lines, a very dangerous place for pedestrians. And remember, TOD requires good pedestrian realm, and so that's what we're trying to do here. So it requires public realm investments to make this piece of land work for a developer. So, you know, it's a chicken or the egg. What comes first? I think the public realm improvements need to be made to help spur this development, because I don't think the developer can afford making some of these development investments himself, these public realm investments himself. Next slide.
You can do it both ways. I mean, sometimes on the Healthline, that being there really does, we've seen studies where the infrastructure renewal helps developers want to make their buildings and develop things. We've seen that on the Clifton line as well, where building owners, even small owners, are making improvements to their built form because of that improvement. Lewis Stokes.
That's exactly right. An urban economist would call that the neighborhood effect, and it's been studied multiple times in multiple places because it has the effect both in both directions. If a city does not enforce its codes and allows broken windows to remain broken, doesn't sweep the streets and fix lampposts, and the curbs and sidewalks get all gutted and terrible, the building owners don't maintain their buildings and the neighborhood goes in decline. But the reverse happens as well. And the reverse happens a lot faster than the decline does. So you make an investment in the public realm, you improve all the public infrastructure, and boom, what happens is that the developers come in, the building owners come in, and they start improving their properties. You can see that. You saw that happen on Euclid Corridor, for example, and other parts of the city where public has made investments in the infrastructure. Even along Broadway Avenue in sections between East 55th and where the Third Federal Savings and Loan Building headquarters is.
So let's move ahead. We talked a little bit about emerging markets, and one of the, as we talked about, if you look at the hot spots in Cleveland, University Circle, West 25th Street, Ohio City, University Circle's running out of land, so they're moving east. And where is east? East Cleveland. The hub of RTA services on the east are at Windermere, right at Stokes Station's in the middle of East Cleveland. We own a lot of land there. We have a huge bus garage as well as a station. We built a Head Start Center. That is the center of East Cleveland. And with our land there and the development pressure that we believe will be happening as University Circle continues to move east, and through some of the social equity programs that we are seeing emerge now, this is a great place. East Cleveland has great bones, great transit, they have great facilities, and look at what they're missing is some housing for townhouses. You know, they have the Rockefeller mansions, and they have some, they have single family houses, but we're looking at this in front of our station along Euclid, some townhouses, and then down Deborah Ann Lane, we own some property there, more townhouses, and bringing density to this area and new development because there's a big elderly population and they would like this. This could be used also for intergenerational housing, which is a need that we've not met. And I think the NOACA study for staying in place showed that there was something. So we can go to the next slide. I guess it's questions. I see a question up here, but I think, Gail, you're going to go through that. So just to wrap it up, what is keeping, we have a lot of opportunities here for transit-oriented development, and you can add what you need. What some of the issues are is that the kind of land that we own near transit stops, we are primarily in an open cut. We're either below or above surface, so some of our land is irregularly shaped. It's difficult to get to. There's some issues with it. So development of that can be costly. And keeping that within market realm can be difficult. In addition, a lot of land that are publicly developed has not been at market. They give developers that so that we have to share in that. RTA doesn't give, we rent. And we'd like to share in that development. You'll see that going forward. And market drives it. And unfortunately, the cost needed for new development is above where it's marketable sometimes. So lots of subsidies have to be enraged. The Aspen Place had 7 layers of subsidies on that. And some of the development that we've been studying on 25th Street also has several layers. Or it's just done by one developer who can bankroll it, but that's not often. I don't know if you want to add anything, Ken.
No, I think you covered it really, really well.
Okay. So we have questions, Gail?
Yes, there is one question that I see. Is there a need for TOD zoning? And does TOD reduce the need for current parking requirements?
The answer is yes and yes. If the average household is 2 and people have 2 cars, then one person can take transit. I know that some of the parking requirements have been lessened if they're near transit. And zoning is really critical for TOD. Sometimes they need a lot of variances. I know that one developed Bear Harbor needed like 25 of them just to get a urban center that wasn't related to the car in the city. That's why on 25th Next, we are working really closely with the city, with Fred and his group, to look at form-based codes, to look at what form we want to set forth for that entire corridor, so that we'll have more density, more equity, and create a streetscape that's ripe for development. That's why the Van Aken district works, because the city of Shaker Heights has very strict forms that they have adhered to, and they have development and design guidelines and principles that they put forth. On the Healthline, we also had some very loose TOD guidelines that we, in the Midtown group, they were, it was an overlay district that we put on so that density would gradient down. Shaker Square, that's why that worked, because it gradiates down the density from the train lines down through some of the other housing along there. So yes, it's very vital. You can do it in a lot of ways: design guidelines, overlay districts, just agreements with developers.
In fact, if you look at what happened in Portland, Oregon, when they were developing their Portland streetcar line, the developers came in and says, yeah, we would love to build these buildings, so you're going to have a streetcar where it's all transit oriented. You need to get rid of the parking requirements not necessary, because, you know, I can build a building for people, but I don't want to build a building twice as big to house cars either. So it helps the developer reduce the cost of building a building if he doesn't also have to provide parking. So the cities that have parking requirements for buildings need to adjust those parking requirements downward, especially with respect to TOD and buildings adjacent to transit systems. It worked in Portland, and it can work anywhere where you have good transit services that connect people to multiple destinations.
And if you look at the city, the Slavic Village, where you have the Boys and Girls Club, they have 5 parking spaces. So the city reduced that substantially for that development to go forward. And the city is very, they're looking at things like, do we need minimums? Do we need maximums? I mean, how do we look at parking? And I think you'll see several in Little Italy that have just been passed without much parking. Downtown, a lot of the new buildings, not new, but the rehab buildings do not have parking.
One of the interesting, when we were doing the Red Line extension study, one of the options was to go down 152nd Street to get over to Lakeshore Boulevard. And when you look at the corner that's across the street from Collinwood High School, you look at an old picture of what that corner used to look like back in the 40s and 50s, and was very transit oriented. The buildings were up on the street face. Then you look at a picture today, and it's, you know, 1950s zoning, setbacks, parking requirements, strip shopping mall. It's ugly, it's terrible, and it's not transit oriented, it's car oriented. So when Maribeth was talking earlier about the 3Ds in TOD, about you know, density, diversity, and design, it's really about the design element and making sure that the zoning supports that design element to make sure that this thing works for pedestrians and transit users, and it's not designed around cars.
So Ken and Maribeth, should there be vehicle restrictions in the tenants' leases?
I think a lot of them have it. I think tenants, I know in some buildings, they're able to buy or lease a space at maximum 2. And many of them have that already. But in certain areas, it's like you have to minimize. If you only have a supply of 10 and you have these units, it's going to be, again, supply and demand. The cost will be astronomical, and you're going to have to limit those few spaces to people, and they really don't need them as much. I mean, people who live in urban areas with transit don't drive their cars a whole lot on the weekends, maybe.
Yes, in fact, what we have found in some cities is that people get rid of their cars entirely, use transit for their everyday life, and then when they want to go on a weekend jaunt or take a trip, they rent a car.
Okay, so then how about shared vehicles? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that really starts to fit in well with that. So say in the Van Aken district, if you lived in one of those rental houses and you worked at the clinic and you didn't have a car, what we're looking at is something called mobility hubs, where there are shared car services. Like there's one Sway that you can use an electric car, or there's a lot of other ones where you can just have a car share when you need it, take it and come back. So that I think you're going to see that as the market matures in some areas after the pandemic is over.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have another question?
We've bored you to death.
No.
And it's your fault.
I think you must have answered all of their questions.
Oh, there's more to come. Please.
No, there is more. Yeah, if you look at the NOACA study, you'll find that there are other emerging areas, and in fact, what's really remarkable is that the Buckeye Woodhill area is now going under redevelopment. There's a piece of Slavic Village up on Broadway Avenue where St. Alexis Hospital used to be. University Settlement.
Michael's.
Huh?
St. Michael's. No one will know what St. Alexis is. They might remember St. Michael's.
Well.
Yeah, I know you were born at St. Alexis.
No, I was not. I was born in East Cleveland at Huron Road Hospital, which no longer exists, but that's another story. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, where the velodrome is, for those of you who now know where the velodrome is, that vacant lot used to be a hospital area, and University Settlement is planning a major development there along with housing. And that was one of the emerging market areas that we did an analysis on in the NOACA study and had some concepts. And it's really remarkable to see that, you know, some of what the studies that we've done are moving forward at least into the planning phases or in the interest phases of developers and getting that kind of interest going. So we're really pleased about that.
And the nodes don't always have to be trains. They can be buses. So, you know, we'll look at that in the future too.
We have another question in the meantime. So what is the potential for RTA rail extension of the Red Line to Berea or Euclid Square for Amazon, or the Blue Line to Randall Park, you know, Amazon and Jack's, or Chagrin Highlands?
Well, let me talk about Berea and Euclid Square, and I'll let Maribeth talk about Randall Park and Chagrin. How's that?
That sounds great.
Okay, I was the project manager on both of those Red Line extension studies. It's not likely. The Red Line to Berea is not likely. It just doesn't pencil out. The expense of getting to Berea is too much, and the ridership generated by that extension is not enough. On the other hand, the extension to Euclid is a wonderful extension. If RTA had the local share to develop that, it would pencil out. It would be a very good project. It has a lot of potential development sites along it, particularly at Noble Road, right down the street from what was once General Electric's Nela plant. I think GE sold their Nela plant, but Nela is going to stay there. The Red Line extension to Euclid makes a lot of sense. It pencils out. It generates 7,500 new riders per day. That is not people diverting from buses to trains. Those are people diverting from cars to trains. 7,500 new riders per day on the Red Line is more riders than the blue and green lines carry today collectively. So that extension should get built. Hopefully it would get built, not maybe in my lifetime, but someday it will. And it's just a matter of coming up with the local funding to share with the feds. You know, it's got to be a 50-50 match.
And
That's a tough one, huh, Maribeth?
it's a lot of money. Just
That's
to add on the Berea extension, also when the railroads did their improvements to the rail lines, they really took out a lot of the right-of-way we could have used for a train extension. I mean, it actually would have to gone to a streetcar or a light rail, and that really made it a lot more expensive.
Oh, it made it a lot more expensive. Yeah, it did.
We are currently serving the Euclid Square Mall with a bus line and the Amazon centers, and we changed the bus line so we actually do go into the Amazon fulfillment center. So as that network of fulfillment centers grows, we'll see what we can do about, you know, transporting people. You asked about Chagrin Highlands and the blue line and the green line. There is a vacant lot where in the Van Aken district, Shaker Heights calls it the 100% corner because it's so well situated, but it is a vacant lot. That is where the blue line could conceivably proceed and go down to hopefully I-271 to a huge parking lot. Right now, that would also be costly. I think what might happen is, what I'd like to see happen is that area grow as an intermodal hub for bus, and then us get some sort of bus rapids transit with the cooperation of Akron, Lake Tran, and the other transit agencies to serve that area of our county, because it does go intercounty down into University Circle. Try to figure out how to do that. So that's something I'm eyeing in the future, as well as on you know, the Euclid Square. We do end our treatment of the BRT of the Healthline right in the middle of East Cleveland. So some sort of continued treatment of a bus line, because we do continue east, and that's the beginning of the 41 line, one of our highest crosstown routes. It's not inconceivable that, and we're working on it, to work with the city of East Cleveland to continue those street stations down Euclid, and maybe a prototype or a minimum operating segment of a new line that Ken talked about of the Red Line extension.
We have another question. Some person his understanding is that RTA gave permission to build on the Van Aken right away to the intersection to the developer, and has RTA reclaimed that right of way?
The right of way through Shaker for RTA is a series of permanent transportation easements. We can retain that use for easements. We don't have the right to give it to anyone. It's ours, granted from Shaker in perpetuity for transit. So what we did do is we did have rights to the extension of the Green Line beyond the Green Road Station, where the bikeway to Beechwood is, and that was granted, but we sold it. But we didn't, you know, we are working right now with RMS and the city of Shaker to just make the Van Aken station the best it can be.
Okay. Well, we're have no more questions, and we're drawing to the end of our time. So I just want to thank you, Ken and Maribeth, for your informative discussion. And I want to thank the audience too for tuning in. And I hope you all found this as interesting as I did. And just to let you know, we will send the PowerPoint presentation to everyone who registered. And I also hope that all of our audience members and our speakers will join us for our next Lunch and Learn on Thursday, October 15th, when we'll be talking about equitable public engagement. The speakers that day will be Nelson Beckford, who is the Program Director for Neighborhood Revitalization and Engagement with the Cleveland Foundation. Joanna Brown, who is the Program Director of GCP Equity Inclusion for the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Nicholas Goris, who is a PE, Deputy Engineer of the Geauga County Engineers Office. Joyce Wong, Director of Planning and Placemaking for the Midtown CDC, and Richard Wong, who is the Planning Director for the City of Cleveland Heights. And you can register for that October 15th session on Eventbrite. And in case you're all wondering, gosh, why are you skipping September? Well, September, you're all welcome to come virtually to our annual meeting. It will be held on Friday, September 11th. And we have speakers lined up, and you can register for that via our website. So until then, I want to thank everybody for joining us again, and take care and plan on.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Great job, everyone.
Good luck. Thank you, Nweka.
Yeah.